Hey, Tommy from the Run Testers with another running shoe full review. In this video, we are going to be taking a look at the Adidas Takumi Sen 10. Now, we were sent these from the guys over at Sport Shoes. We're not paid to do this review, so we can say whatever we want. But a big thanks to Sport Shoes for sending these over so that we can do some videos on them. Also, if you go into the link below, you can find the link through to the Sport Shoes website where you can find out more about this shoe. Right, let's dive in and do the review. The Adidas Takumi Sen 10 costs £170 or $180. It weighs 192 grams or 6.8 ounces for men in a size 8, and the drop is 6mm. The Adidas Takumi Sen 10 is the latest version of the brand's lightweight speed shoe. According to Adidas, it's designed for training and racing up to 10k, featuring 2 layers of Lightstrike Pro cushioning along with Energyrods 2.0 to provide a propulsive and snappy toe off and minimise energy loss. There's a mesh upper designed to offer a high level of breathability as well as wick sweat away from the foot, a Slinglaunch heel construction for a lockdown fit, and a traditional lacing system to ensure there's no slippage. The shoe also features a healthy covering of Adidas's impressive Continental rubber outsole to improve grip and durability.
So I found the fit of the Adidas Takumi Sen 10 to be very good for me in my normal running shoe size. I've got a UK 9 here, which is a US 9.5 in Adidas. Generally a US 9.5 or a US 10, it kind of varies a little bit with brands, but this is a fairly tight fitting shoe and a narrow fitting shoe as you would expect from a lightweight short distance racer like this. But I have a narrow foot, it fits very well for me, but I also don't think it's aggressively narrow and tight. So, it's not as uncompromising on that front as some Adidas shoes have been in the past, but it is a fairly tight fit all round as you'd expect for a shoe like this, but it works well for me. Really secure hold for running fast and decent hold around the heel as well. I haven't had any problems with the heel, which I sometimes do have with Adidas's heel design. No heel rubbing, haven't had to heel lock it. So yeah, very good for me in my normal running shoe size.
So fit for me has been generally fine in the Takumi Sen 10. Now I've had mine in a UK size 8. That is my typical running shoe size. And what I would say first and foremost, it's definitely a pretty narrow fitting shoe. It is a shoe that's quite hard to get on, I think, initially, but I think once it's on, it does feel and kind of wraps really nicely. What I would say is that there's not much give in this upper, so I think if you maybe had wider feet, it might feel like a bit more snug, particularly in the middle of this shoe. So that is something to keep in mind here. Now up front, it does feel pretty snug in terms of the toe box, but I think, for this type of shoe and the types of runs that I would be doing and want to do in this shoe, I think that amount of space kind of works for me, and I think there may be an argument to go half a size up in this shoe, but I think ultimately for me, I'd be quite happy with the level of space you're getting up front of the toes. The only other things I'd say, you are getting a little bit of padding here in the kind of inside of the heel, which I think is important to kind of keep things kind of nicely in place at the back of the shoe. My only kind of real little criticism is maybe what you're getting here in terms of the tongue and the lacing. I have found a bit challenging to get a good lockdown there. There has been a couple of times where they've come loose and I've had to kind of double tie them before I've kind of gone out, and I've kind of had some issues there. But ultimately, when it's worked, it's been absolutely fine. So what I would say is it is a narrow fitting shoe. For my narrow feet, it's been absolutely fine. It's a bit snug up front of the toes, but for me, I think that kind of works, particularly at the distances you're probably going to use this shoe. I would say go true to size. There may be an argument to have a look at going half a size up if you like a little bit more space up front in the toe box.
So the fit for me in the Adidas Takumi Sen 10, I'm an 8 in the UK, this is an 8. Sometimes in Adidas shoes, they are a little bit small from the UK sizing, so I would normally go up half a size in some shoes like the Adidas Pro 3, which is I've got a size 8 in those, and it is a little bit too short on my toes. These I didn't have a problem with at all. It fits me fine, plenty of space in the forefoot, and not too narrow for my average sized feet. So I would stay to my size in this shoe.
So in terms of run test, I haven't actually run in the previous Takumi Sen shoes, and I haven't had a chance to race in this shoe just yet. But what I've basically done is used it for the kind of speed focus, the kind of faster sessions I have had that kind of come up in the last few weeks to kind of put it to the test, and that's including kind of some 5k 10k runs at there or thereabouts in terms of some of my quicker kind of 10k 5k kind of pace, and then I've done a track session in it as well. I've tried to push it beyond that kind of 10k distance as well to see how maybe it can handle some longer kind of running as well too. And ultimately, I had some expectations of how this was going to feel. I've used the Hokus Yellow Road, I've used the New Balance Super Comp Pacer as well, which kind of sits in this criteria of these kind of short distance kind of shoes. I was expecting to be, keep me low to the ground, going to be a little bit on the firmer side. And also, but in return, giving you something that feels pretty responsive, feels good when you are running at your quicker paces in this shoe. Now, what I would say is, I didn't feel like it was actually as firm as I expected it to be. And I think, particularly in that first session when I was running, it was kind of a 5 mile run, kind of at around 7 kind of minute mile pace, dropping it below that as well too. And I felt like when I was engaging with this midsole, and I think that's a key thing here, you're not getting a shoe that's doing a lot of the work for you or trying to, assist you in a massive way. It's more about, you run your hardest and what you get is the rewards from running your hardest. And I think you engage that midsole. I don't think it's massively as firm as I thought it would be, and I think there is a good amount of cushioning there to make sure there's a little bit of a bounce there. It's not huge, but there's enough there to make that feeling feel very nice overall. I could just feel the transitions in the shoe. It's very, very quick, very what you would expect to see from a kind of a shorter distance shoe, and it felt great running quicker in this shoe. And that was the main thing for me. I just felt like I was getting through those kind of transitions very, very quickly, kind of heel to toe, straight, and what you would expect. And when you are running quick, it feels nice to run quick in. I think the track session was a really good example of where the shoe really shines. And I had a session where I was doing kind of 5 times 640 meters, and then I finished with 300 meters. So kind of shorter reps there, but a shorter, sharper session, and it felt good. The weight feels good. I know it's jumped up in weight from the previous shoe, but for me, I think the general weight of the shoe feels very good. It's still pretty light. It's a breathable shoe as well too, and I felt like I was flying in that session, and it feels nice. And as I said, this is not a shoe that's massively assisting you, but if you are working at your hardest and you're working at those quicker paces, then I do think you get something that works really nicely. It is responsive, it feels aggressive, but not overly aggressive. I don't think it's massively unstable. I've never felt like it was unstable in any way too either. And there's an outsole that feels great. That track session, it was a bit wet and it was absolutely fine from a traction point of view. I think even kind of cornering feels great, and it feels nimble to do that as well too. When I did try to run longer in this shoe, what I would say, I did find it in that 5 mile, when I was getting nearer the end of that kind of 5 mile run, that I was feeling a little bit of discomfort at the arch of my foot. And I don't know if that's really a mixture of maybe getting a little bit tired or easing off a little bit, whether it's the design of the shoe, but I did notice that. And I think on the longer run, I did kind of an 8 mile run in this shoe. I did feel like at the latter stages of that run, I was feeling that kind of arch a little bit more in terms of the discomfort. As I said, it didn't stop me from running in the shoe, but it is something I noticed. Maybe said to me, would I want to run longer than 10k in the shoe? I'd be a little bit unsure about that. But ultimately, apart from that kind of arch kind of thing that I noticed, I think elsewhere the shoe has felt great. And as I said, it's not a shoe that is going to do a lot of the work for you. You've got to put the work in. And when you do, I don't think you get a massively, I say surprisingly, I didn't think it was it wasn't as firm as I expected it to be, but you get that kind of firmness that makes sure you get something that feels responsive. And when you are kind of running quicker, I think below kind of 7 minute mile pace, for me, it worked really well. I think above that, maybe it's not quite where it wants to work, where it wants to do its best work, and you're really engaging or getting the most out of the midsole that you're getting here. But overall, a very kind of polished experience, as I said. In the shorter distance that I've done, the shorter session I've done, I haven't had a bad run in it. That longer run, I think, or slightly longer than kind of 10k run, kind of the 8 mile run, I think that, I did start to notice some things which maybe would put me off running a little bit longer in it. But overall though, it's been great to run in.
So this is the first time that I have tested the Takumi Sen line, and on paper, it's not really a shoe that I would generally look at using. I like big cushioned midsoles, I like bounce, I like softness, and the Takumi Sen range has never really been one that is designed to do that. It's a short distance, fast race shoe, basically 5k to 10k distance. So I was quite surprised when I tested this shoe out to find that I really like it. I have used it for quite a few things now. I've used it for 5k race, I've used it for 3 track sessions and a couple of easy runs as well, just to see how it felt at a more comfortable pace. What I found is that it is a very, very enjoyable shoe when you're running fast. For track sessions, it's probably my favourite track shoe at the moment. It just feels so light on the feet. but you do get a nice bit of propulsion from the combination of that Lightstrike Pro midsole foam and the Energyrods 2.0 in it. So it is a really nice fast shoe if you're looking for something that just picks up the pace, gives you really fast acceleration, and just feels like you've not got anything on your feet, basically. The other thing I would say about the shoe as well is that because I love big cushion shoes, I'm not normally a fan of something that has a smaller midsole stack height in it. But what I felt from this shoe is that cushioning is actually fairly adequate. It doesn't feel like there's limited cushioning in it. You can still feel a nice bit of cushioning in this shoe, despite the fact that it is a relatively lean, smaller shoe. So it's definitely a comfortable shoe for doing those 10k distances in. When I am out doing track sessions in it, I can really feel that it's quite a comfortable shoe. It's not just sort of your average racing flat style lean midsole. It does have a little bit more to it. I wouldn't say I feel a lot from the Energyrods, but it's the same feeling that I get from things like the Adidas Pro 3, where it's a bit more subtle in comparison to something like the Alpha Fly or the Vaporfly. It's definitely doing something. It feels very poppy and does feel very quick, but it's not a noticeable feel from that midsole foam and the Energyrods. So yeah, even on the easy runs, I actually felt quite nice due to that really nice Lightstrike Pro midsole foam. So yeah, it's a 5 to 10k race shoe. I would definitely say it fits into that band. I probably wouldn't use it for much more, although I think if you were used to using less cushion shoes, this is a really good shoe for maybe half marathon distance, maybe even marathon, if that's the sort of feeling you want. But for me, definitely a 5 to 10k shoe. And I almost got a parkrun PB in this. I think I was 1 second off. Normally I would use my Alpha Fly 1s for parkrun, but I used this and it just felt great. It just felt really fast. So overall, I'm really impressed with this shoe, and definitely it's formed part of my rotation for those shorter runs, training sessions, faster efforts, intervals, all those sorts of things. And yeah, well worth a look if you're looking for a short distance, fast, light shoe.
I've done 50k in the Adidas Takumi Sen 10. That's included a couple of workouts, a 5-mile race, like a decent progression 10k, and track reps for 10 times 400 down the track. And I really love the shoe, just like I really love the Adidas Takumi Sen 8, which I used for a couple of 100 kilometers with lots of racing, just because it's just a really nice feel to the shoe. And the same with the Adidas Takumi Sen 10, which is almost a break from the standard fast shoe you use these days, which is a very high stack shoe, very big bouncy shoe. This is a much more direct and aggressive shoe, but still has a fair amount of comfort there. It's still a reasonably high midsole with a super foam in it, but gives you that slightly more grounded, nimble feel, really lets you feel the speed a bit better, and just feels fantastic to run fast in. Just really fun, basically, to run fast in. So the changes I've noticed here with this Takumi Sen 10 compared to the 8, which I think was quite similar to the 9, is I do think it's got a slight little bit of extra firmness. You get a slightly more responsive ride, a little bit more snap from the new way the Energyrods are set up, but I do think overall they're very similar shoes in terms of performance level. But yeah, it does, I think, maybe add a tiny bit of a pop there to the forefoot in particular. So the race I did in the Takumi Sen 10, which we've got a race video up on the channel, was a 5-mile race in Victoria Park in London. I ran my 5-mile PB in that race of 26 minutes and 6 seconds, and yeah, it felt really good for that. So light, so aggressive, so easy to pick the feet up and accelerate, especially if you're actually racing, as I was for lots of, trying to join groups, move away from groups, that kind of thing. Being able to put a little surge of speed on in this shoe feels really good. Same obviously when you're kicking for the line as well, and that kind of differs a little bit from some of the big carbon shoes where it's more about getting into a rhythm and just pounding along at a certain pace. This feels more like a racer in that light feeling that you have that allows you to change your speed a little bit during those events. Same time, I think in that race it kind of showed well, I do think the Takumi Sen lacks compared to those big stack carbon shoes. Like Victoria Park is a big flat space with sweeping turns. It's easy to use a tool shoe in that kind of environment, and you do get a little bit more bounce and propulsion from the 40mm full super shoes with the full plates. I do think you just get a bit more oomph, and it can help you hold a really fast pace deep into a race, and maybe overall give you that faster time. And I think the Takumi Sen didn't really deliver a time that was going to be much slower than those shoes over that kind of distance, but it's something that would come into play, I think, over long events. Half marathon for sure, and marathon, and maybe even things like 10Ks. If I'm on a nice flat stretch, I would probably rather be in a big stack shoe over the Takumi Sen 10 myself. But there are lots of events and real world running situations where I do think it has a little bit of an edge because it is so light and nimble. The Takumi Sen 8 I used for a half marathon on a very twisting course, and I think that was as good as anything you could use on that course because of the way it allows you to attack corners and then accelerate out of them a bit better than the bigger, slightly heavier, less stable shoes. That also makes it good for lots of things like park runs, where you're just doing little looped courses with quick turns and all that kind of thing, or just real world training. Like I did the progression 10k in this shoe, where I went from I think a 3:45 a k down to 3:13 a k, something like that. I think it was a kick in the last k, and that was on a loop near me, and it's a pretty good loop. I pick it because it's fairly open and flat. There's not too many people around, but there are sections where you're dodging people, you're on narrow roads. I have to thread between a couple of bollards and a couple of sections and things like that, and that's where this is a really great shoe for it, because it's just easier to do it in a lightweight shoe like this that is quite grounded, quite stable, quite agile, and it makes it really good for those training situations. First run I did, and it was like an easy to steady run around my local area, and again, things like cambered pavements, post boxes, there's people, there's dogs. It's a good shoe to use for those sessions where you're not just on a fantastic circuit lined up with pristine asphalt or even on the track. That said, it is an amazing track shoe, and I loved using it for a track session where I did 10 times 400 meters in it. That was actually a longer track session where I did the first half, which was 10 times 1k at 3:20 pace in the Puma Fast R2, and the second half was 10 times 400 meters at 75 second pace in the Takumi Sen, and it did kind of show off the differences between these two levels of super shoes in terms of stack and bounce, with the Puma feeling really good for those longer reps, cruising along at that pace, helping me hold that pace really nicely. And then when I dropped to the shorter reps, slightly higher speed, a little bit of extra aggression you got from the Takumi, made up for the slight lack of bounce you have compared to the Puma, which is a fair bit heavier, but does give you a bit more of that booming propulsion you expect from a super shoe. Whereas the Takumi, it's more about that lightness and speed, and you still get, obviously, propulsion from this shoe. It is still a reasonably high stack with Energyrods and Lightstrike Pro in there. It's just a little bit lessened compared to something like the Adidas Pro 3, which you've got the bigger stack, and it's more geared towards providing that loping, bouncing sensation. This is more about really giving you the revs for acceleration and fast running and agility.
So my verdict on the Adidas Takumi Sen 10, I love it. I think it's a fantastic race shoe, and I was not expecting that from how it would appear on paper. It has successfully become a shoe in my rotation now for those interval sessions and for short distance races, those sorts of things where I want a light shoe, but I also want a bit more from it. I want a little bit of energy return. I want some of that energy rod feeling of propulsion in there. It's got the lot, really. For those shorter distances, I definitely wouldn't use it for anything over 10k, but I'm picking this shoe up now more and more for those short, sharp efforts where I just want something that really helps me go fast for a short period of time. Alternatives to this would be things like the New Balance Pacer, which I don't mind that shoe. I just didn't feel like it was really giving me a lot back. I think there's a little bit more to the shoe. I think that foam is better than the foam that you get in the New Balance Pacer. So yeah, definitely a shoe that is in my rotation now. I'm very impressed with it.
The verdict is that the Takumi Sen 10 is a brilliant shoe. It's one I really love. I do think it's a slightly hard shoe to recommend if you're building a kind of classic running shoe rotation, though. So if you're putting in your easy day shoe, your cushion shoe, your daily trainer, your mid-level shoe that can do workouts, can do a bit of everything, and then your all-out racing shoe. If I was just going to buy one of each of those shoes, none of them would be the Takumi Sen. I'd buy a more well-rounded carbon shoe, especially someone who usually goes for marathons over shorter events. Get something like the Alpha Fly, which is still a very light shoe, still brilliant for 5k. Would probably still take it over the Takumi for very easy 5ks in a circle, that kind of thing. Then the mid-level shoe, the Takumi, not really a daily trainer. It's a bit too stripped back. It's not going to be ideal with something like a super trainer or a shoe like the New Balance Rebel or Puma Velocity, where you've got a bit more cushioning, a bit more general use shoe, and then obviously it's not a cushion shoe for easy run. So it's hard to slip into that kind of rotation unless your only races are things like 5k, 10ks, and then you've got a very good short distance racer here. I still would take something like the Vaporfly over that in that situation, because it is just as light as the Takumi, gives you a bit more cushion, a bit more bounce and propulsion, but it's up there with those kind of shoes for short distances. But if I was building a 4-shoe rotation, if I was going to add an extra shoe to my rotation, I would pick the Takumi probably over everything else, because it's just such a fun shoe to have around for speed sessions and races where you're not really necessarily going all out, but races just aren't in perfect conditions. Like I do a lot of that kind of thing, like park runs or club runs, and Things like that, where you're not lining up your big A race on a big city course that's just hammering down long straights with like barriers and everything. That's a different kind of race to me, almost compared to the day-to-day, the bread and butter of racing, which does involve those kind of random little courses in towns, or a club race in the evening. I have a lot of like club races in the evening over the summer where you're just heading out some random country roads and things like that. The Takumi works really well for, and I did enjoy it in the 5-mile race, even on a great course in Victoria Park as well. So, and then it brings so much fun to speed sessions. It's a really good track shoe. It's a really good 10k 15k workout shoe on the road as well, and just love having it around. So if you could slip it into rotation quite easily alongside another general training shoe for other kinds of speed session or longer workouts, or just slightly easier runs. The Takumi does a lot of stuff really well, and it'll certainly have a spot in certain rotations who runners who do a lot of the stuff I've just been talking about above. In that case, I would say you wouldn't have to really go for the latest version of the shoe. I do think the Takumi Sen 8 was just as good as it. I didn't test the Takumi Sen 9, but I think it's quite similar all round, so you'll be seeing those shoes in sales. Takumi is a shoe that pops up in sales, even the newest version, and it has dropped to around 100 quid, $100 before, maybe slightly less than that. And at that price, it becomes a bit more approachable, because I wouldn't pick it up as a fun workout shoe and the occasional short distance racer for its full price. It's quite a high price for that, but if you get it at a nice big reduction, it's a great shoe to have around. I think that does a really good job on lots of runs, and like I say, it's really fun to run in. So yeah, really enjoyed the Takumi Sen 10. If you have a use case for it, it's worth grabbing, I think.
So my verdict on the Adidas Takumi Sen 10 is that this is a shoe that I have very much enjoyed running in. I think when you use it in the right scenarios, the right distances, the right speeds, I think absolutely you get a experience here that I think feels great when you are running at your fastest. Now, if I had a 5k race tomorrow, if I had a kind of interval session, a track session, would I use the shoe? Would I be happy to use the shoe? Absolutely, I'd be happy to grab for this. I know that I would get a good experience and a good session from this shoe. I think ultimately for me, if I was doing those kind of speed sessions, if I was doing a kind of short distance race, I probably would use a carbon shoe that I'm probably already using for kind of running marathons, which I know can kind of transfer those shorter distances as well. But if you wanted a dedicated shoe, I think absolutely this is a kind of standout option where you maybe don't want to be running in your carbon kind of racer for all of your distances, all of your sessions. Now, I haven't run the previous Takumi Sen shoes. I haven't run the Nike Streak Fly. The only other shoes that I've run in this kind of profile have been the Hoka Cielo Road. I think the New Balance Supercomp Pacer as well too. Both very good shoes, two shoes that I've enjoyed running in as well too, designed for the same types of runs. I think for me, I would probably put this just above those two shoes. I think there's not much between it and the Cielo Road, where I think maybe I felt it a little bit more in my legs in the kind of quicker sessions that I did in the Cielo Road. I think the upper is nice and thin like it is on the Takumi Sen. I think you get a good level of midsole bounce there, and that kind of low, kind of aggressive feel as well too. It's the same with the Supercomp Pacer, but I think once I'd used the Cielo Road and obviously using this as well, I feel like these two, this shoe and that shoe, the Cielo Road, is a bit of a step up from the New Balance shoe. I would say also you're probably getting a little bit more in terms of outsole, I think durability from this shoe compared to those two shoes. So if you are looking for a short distance kind of racing shoe, speed shoe, for me, from the ones I've tested, this feels like the standout one for me. Now, I know it's got heavier than the last shoes, but I think ultimately, in terms of my experience, it hasn't felt like a heavy shoe, and I feel like it's a great shoe to run speed sessions. And yeah, I'd have no issue if I had a kind of flat kind of 5k race to do, and I wasn't using my carbon shoe. I'd happily grab the shoe, and I know that I would get a good experience from it, and I know I'd get a good level of outsole grip. I know I'd get something nice and light, something that has a midsole that's, when I put the work in, I'm going to feel the rewards from it as well too. So yeah, all very happy in my experience with the Takumi Sen 10. Absolutely, if you're looking for a short distance racer and a kind of speed work shoe, this is absolutely a standout one to use.
That's it from us on the Adidas Takumi Sen 10. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, click that little bell and all the things that make us happy. And if you click into the caption below, you can find a link to our podcast, which comes out at the end of each month. You can also find a link to this shoe on the Sport Shoes website. Catch you next time.